Citizen Mike Show. News, commentary, interviews. The Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Hey, welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Berdinsky. Over there on the other side of the screen, Christopher K. Shortell. Chris, we got some financial stuff to talk about tonight, but I want to start with a recap of the community pool decision. Just a few days ago, the town council, by a divided vote, decided to authorize a bonding issue or the financing source for a community pool, despite bids that came in higher than some people had hoped. You carry the burden of persuasion for the pro-pool forces, although others spoke as well. Christina Tata took the other side of it. As you reflect back on that meeting, just how do you assess what happened there?
Well, I am pro-pool. I don't know that Christina's point was, have we done everything we possibly could to redeem or reclaim the existing pool? So I don't think it's fair to say she was anti-pool in the sense that she was willing to spend some money on the pool that's there, even at a splash pad or something, and keep what's there. So I just want to make that distinction. In terms of my assessment of how it went, I think the sentiment that I conveyed, that I think the people that voted for it felt, was that if it dies forever. And why would it die? Well, it would die because, to your initial point, it came in at a dollar amount higher than the comfort level of the mayor. The mayor had a $6 million number in his head. We've talked on the show in the past where that number came from. I myself have endorsed that number. And I think, as you said, the bids came in slightly higher. So I think that the feeling was, I think among the five of us that voted for it, I'm sure, Gina Morgenstein is somebody who said she wanted to have 6 lap lanes. I said that too. I think we all kind of said, well, you know what? It's not perfect. But it's really nice. And it's the best we're going to get. A lot of work's gone into it. And I think that was the sentiment was, don't delay. If you delay it now, it's dead forever. So
yeah,
we'll see.
I thought, as I watched it, that the folks that resisted the pool, and there were three that ultimately voted no: Christina Tata, Craig Fishbein, and Vinnie Cervoni. I thought that they weren't as passionate and vigorous and forceful in opposition, and that the pro-pool group, of course, there are more, twice as many, but that the pro-pool group sort of had them, outgunned, or maybe a little bit back on their heels. Do you agree or not with that?
Yeah, I think it. I think, yes. I think we were able not that there was a secret meeting. I think the people who voted for it were able to swallow the stuff they didn't like to yet vote yes. I think on the other side, I don't like speaking for other counselors. Vinnie Cervoni's not anti-pool. He just isn't. Vinnie Cervoni wanted to make this work. I think he didn't say a lot, but I just know from talking to him, I think he's worried about the timing. Craig was upset about the process, which is stuff that you have brought up in terms of transparency. Why didn't we get a la carte options, the 6 lap lanes? So I think what you saw on the so-called other side was kind of a coalition of people who, for various reasons, didn't feel comfortable with it. Whereas on our side, neither did we, but we were like, well, let's just do it because it'll never get done. And I think we also did not buy the COVID argument. And I don't buy the COVID argument. And I think that was what distinguished. So, I mean, you're saying, was it passion? I guess it was passion. I also guess it was the age-old thing in politics. It's you hold your nose sometimes, and you vote for something that you're 80% comfortable with because you know it's the best you're going to get.
Yeah, I was glad. I was glad to see the vote. I was glad you guys did it that night. As you know, my deep reservation. I'm just afraid the pool is going to be too small. But folks, after a while, can get used to it, I suppose. But hey, that's the hand we've been dealt. We'll play it, and we'll have the best time we can out there when the community pool is up and running. Hey, almost this time next year. So good. Congratulations, and a good job presenting the motion and the case for the pool. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, but I don't want to. Let's not. It could get vetoed.
Right. We'll read about the record journal, I guess, when it happens.
Right. I'm just saying. Let's.
Right. There's still time.
I know we don't want to. It could get vetoed, or elements of it could be cut. We voted for the whole thing, so I don't know that we've seen the end of this story.
Okay. Any inside information you want to share, or just the way things could go? Okay.
The way things could go. That's
May.
Yeah. May 8th. What is it? May 8th is 10 days after, I think. May 8th or May 9th. So that's.
I didn't count, but that sounds right.
Yeah. So we'll know more just by that day approaching. We'll see if we get a letter from the mayor or not. That'll be a decision point. So.
Yep. And then there'd have to be a meeting to see if there's an override.
Yeah.
Yeah. Change the subject a little bit. You also had a couple days ago a very important budget workshop, and it was important because three of the biggest departments appeared to answer questions, and I think some of the counselors were looking to discover some savings. There has been a lot of talk around that maybe this is the year to freeze the mill rate, and if that is the case, there's going to have to someone's going to have to find 1.3 million, either increase revenues or take it from reserves or find budget cuts or a combination. How do you think that those three workshops went from the perspective of finding budget cuts?
Not well. Not if
Okay.
if the road to a zero is through budget cuts, we didn't get far on the road so far. But I'm not convinced that's where the road. That's how the path. I'm not convinced that's the path how to get there. But not great in terms of that.
Yeah, so it was the police department, the fire department, and public works that appeared, and those are big budgets. And if you're going to find cuts, it's got to be in those budgets, because everything else is sort of nickels and dimes. And I agree with you. There not a lot of savings was uncovered there. I think the department heads, did a real good job, as they always do, defending their budgets and trying to pry a material sum of money from those department heads, from those budgets, is like trying to pull a tooth from a pit bull. You're just not going to do it, So where do you think the effort stands, the effort to freeze the mill rate? Do you see a coalition forming? How might that go?
I mean, this is my fifth budget. I want to say I've only been part of a council that's actually passed a budget once.
Oh.
I'm 1 for 4. I think last year we passed it with very little fanfare. But the previous 3 years, all sorts of stuff happened. So, and the reason all sorts of stuff happened is that I think most of us have a thing. There's a philosophical landmine. So Craig Fishbein will not vote for a tax increase. So that's his landmine. For other people, maybe they won't vote to touch a penny of the Board of Ed, or maybe they won't vote to undermine the mayor's whole budget philosophy, like different people. Or, one year Jason Zandri and Craig, I think my first budget, Jason and Craig did a really detailed presentation on cuts, but I didn't like their cut to the health insurance line. And they lost my vote. So we all have these landmines. So the question is, part of me thinks that this budget too will die on the rocks of all those counts, all of us. But part of me also thinks for 1.3 million, we have to find that somewhere. It's such a small amount of money in the scheme of the whole budget. For us not to find it and not to be able to agree, and I don't know how we get there. So I'm 50-50 that maybe we can figure it out. So
I want to retill some ground that you and I covered on some prior shows, I think. The amount of money, $1.3 million, represents a very small tax increase. And you and I talked in terms of, isn't this more symbolic than anything else? It's a very small tax increase.
Right.
But for some people, symbols are very important. And I think in the world of politics and government, symbols are quite important. So sometimes there is a time to take a symbolic stance. Also, if there isn't a freeze on the mill rate this year, next year I think is going to be very difficult to do it because we have a couple things going on. We have revaluation in progress, and that is happening in the middle of this pandemic. And there's a lot of reading out there that the pandemic is going to adversely affect real estate values, both residential and commercial. We don't know how the appraiser who is working for the town is going to factor in the coronavirus pandemic. Will that appraiser deduct value, around town because strip malls aren't as valuable because tenants are going out of business or vacating, or, people aren't buying and selling houses because of a lot of things and the unemployment. So if the grand list takes a hit because of the pandemic, the grand list goes down, mill rate has to go up. Now, in an ideal situation, it's a wash. You have a higher mill rate on a house that's valued not as much, and it should be the same. But that wash doesn't always work for everyone. Some people are affected disproportionately than others. So if there's ever, in my view, a time to have a flat mill rate, this would be it. So I count 5 votes. I mean, I see 5 votes there for freezing the mill rate. And I'm going to give you the names in a minute, but some of this, I'd say almost all of it is based on their public statements. Hey, we had Vinny Testa on the show. The last time we did it, he was on for about 2 minutes and a little bit of an interview. We asked him about that. We know Craig Fishbein's position, and the rest I'm just making inferences from the public positions that some of these counselors have taken. But I think 5 votes are there, possibly 6, and it's a matter of whether the particular means and methods of freezing the mill rate appeals sufficiently to the other 4, to cobble the 5. But I think Craig is definitely freeze the mill rate. Just will he agree with everyone else on how to do it? I suspect that Christina Tata, based on public comments she's made, I haven't had a conversation with her about it, she's a possible, if not a probable. I think Joe Marone fits into that category. It's possible to maybe probable. I haven't talked to him, but just on positions he's taken in the past. And it looks to me that the 3 Democrats are chomping at the bit to find a way to come to a zero tax increase. Again, it's if you take too much from the Board of Ed, which I think has got to be on the table, do you lose Vinny Testa because he's an employee of the Board of Ed? It's those kind of compromises that got to be made. Your thoughts on my thoughts?
I didn't hear my name in there.
Well, that's right, because you're an increase the tax kind of a guy. Unless you persuade us otherwise here.
Well, I am. I am not. I've never been somebody who had chased the mythical unicorn. That's repetitive? The unicorn of the zero tax increase. To me, I'm a fan of flattening the curve. And flattening the curve in this instance, I'm talking about expenses over the years. That I'd rather have 2 moderate tax increases than 1 zero and then 1 bigger one. I've had 4 budgets. I voted on 3 of those. I voted with the mayor, and I believe those were 2 of them we lost. But on 3 of those, I voted basically with the mayor's budget because I believed in it. The one I didn't vote was the big illegal budget we did 2 years ago when state funding was in flux, and we ended up passing it with a second. We got to redo. That was the vote where only Tom Laughlin voted no. So anyway, let's go back to your question.
Sure.
I think your assessment is generally correct on who you think would advocate for a zero, but I think you hit it on the head though. I think there's a lot of qualifications in there, and I'm gonna speculate now. So this is not insider. It's what we do.
It's an opinion show.
No. So I think that this goes back to the philosophical minefield. I think Vinny Testa it's not that he's an employee. He is an employee. I think Vinny Testa philosophically, I think it's more of a philosophical issue for him about not cutting, but reducing the increase for education. So I agree with your assessment about Vinny and maybe Gina and Jason. I don't know, just because Vinny's been more vocal, I think, over the years. But would you lose them if the Board of Ed was part of any kind of reduction? Would you lose Marone and Christina if the Board of Ed wasn't part of a reduction? So that's where it starts to get, in the what if there was a sort of hybrid where it's part Board of Ed and it's part, let's appropriate a little more from the surplus, and then if you knocked out any chance that Tom or Vinny or me to a lesser extent will touch it. So it's like a riddle. That's what I'm talking about. There's a very good chance we'll mess this up. There's a great chance we'll mess this up.
I think you're right.
Pay your $57 because we couldn't agree. I think it's going to take all of us, and I'll start with myself.
Yeah,
giving a little bit. But where I'm not comfortable is I'm not taking all of it from the Board of Ed. I'm not taking all of it from the surplus. I'm not cutting all of it from expenses. Like I think that's where I would draw the line in each thing. I think there's a way forward somehow to make everyone a little happy and a little unhappy. And I think maybe if we're all really, like you said, it's the year to do it. That's the only path I see forward. And really the magic number would be 7 votes. That makes it, 5 to pass, 7 to avoid a veto. So.
Yeah. The simplest way, I think I mentioned on prior shows, the simplest way is to take the 1.3 million all from the surplus. And it's not because that 1.3 million from the surplus is actually going to be spent. The surplus, as budgeted, never is spent in full. It does not mean anyone is getting a fatter budget. No department is getting a fatter budget because of that. And at any time, if the mayor wants to impose an austerity budget on the department heads in the middle of the year, he can certainly put the brake on spending, which protects the fund balance in the long run. So, that's the easiest and the simplest way, but probably not the way it's going to go. It may probably be a combination of sources. You got the final thought on that?
Yeah, what's interesting is the Board of Ed, there's been some reporting in the paper about their surplus even being higher.
Okay.
We might recall 2 years ago, the Board of Ed proactively gave back $400,000 before we even, from what the mayor recommended, they just gave it back. So, if the Board of Ed were looking at this, they may, I don't know if they watch the show, but they may want to think about doing that.
Boycotting it now, I hear.
Boycotting it? Well,
yeah.
it's a little tip. If they come forward and say, here's 400, we don't need this other 400, but they're already giving $1 million. That might go a long way to just ensuring that, nothing else gets, I don't know. I'm just saying that kind of gesture would be something that, how could anyone then go after anything else? I don't know. They're coming up on Tuesday. I don't know when we air, but they're coming up on Tuesday, the 5th, Cinco de Mayo. And so that'll be, we'll have to talk about, because I know we want to go on to the next segment, but I think with the Board of Ed, I do want to be fair here. They're running a huge surplus. They have 1.8 million in the bank already. But the thing with the Board of Ed is a lot of their costs are reoccurring in terms of salary, benefit, and transportation. So I haven't really, I don't know, I really want to dive into their budget to understand what could they spend these reserves on. I mean, could they buy enough computers or textbooks to eat up these reserves? It may be that they can't. I don't know. So anyway.
Let's talk about that after the Board of Ed workshop, and we'll take your temperature on that, and get your assessment of how the other councils reacted to their budget presentation. But I want to turn to the cap and non-recurring account. There was one of the budget workshops was devoted to that a couple of days ago. And the capital and non-recurring fund is an important fund. That is the fund from which Wallingford takes money to pave roads, repair sidewalks, bridges, keep buildings in good shape, stuff like that. It's not very sexy, that's true, but it's extremely important. And how they perform affects the day-to-day quality of life. It's not like Park and Rec or anything, but the roads that we drive on a lot, and so on and so forth. So paying some attention to the cap and non-recurring budget, I think makes sense. I think this time last year, I also dove into that cap and non-recurring budget. But let's explain how that works a little bit. Where does the cap and non-recurring fund, cap for capital and non-recurring expenses, that's really what that stands for, where does that money come from? Well, it originates with electric division ratepayers. They pay their electric bills, the money goes into the electric division, and by ordinance, the electric division is required to send a slice of that money over to the general fund, which then gets, that money then goes immediately into the cap and non-recurring fund. And in recent years, I'm going to round it, it's about 1.8 billion. So it's a steady stream of income, rounded 1.8 million year after year after year after year. And from that money, the Public Works Department and maybe some other departments get involved too, but primarily the Public Works Department, they use that money to do the things that they do, not operations, but capital improvements like roads, buildings, bridges, stuff like that. So the question that pops into my mind, like once a year, about this time of year, is if we could craft our own management plan for the cap and non-recurring fund, what would it look like? How would we want it done? We've inherited a system that's long ingrained in the culture of Wallingford, the political culture. So we can't turn that ship around. I'm just philosophizing, daydreaming, and say, if I could make things a little different, what would I do? And again, this is an opinion show, and I'm just throwing this out. And I would say this, that I would first look to the history of the cap and non-recurring fund to see what's going on, to see if there's a problem. And I see that the end of last year in the cap and non-recurring fund was $6.8 million. Now, we've already mentioned the 1.8 million comes in year after year. And at the end of last year, there was $6.8 million in that fund. And I would use a judgmental term. It was stuck in the fund. It was log jam, however you want to phrase it. But I say, that's not an acceptable result to end a year with $6 million in the capital non-recurring fund. That money is supposed to pave our roads and fix our sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't belong stuck in a fund, gathering dust and earning almost no interest, especially these days. So I would say that 6.8 million in that fund is unacceptable. And there should be a policy statement that we're never going to allow that to happen again. So you say, okay, what is the right number? What should the fund balance be? And there's no litmus test, I don't think, but the beginning premise would be $1 into the cap and non fund should mean $1 out in an expeditious amount of time. You shouldn't be running a big balance. It shouldn't be a cushion. It shouldn't be a savings account. Money comes in, and the same amount of money should go out reasonably soon. And that involves a change in management style, a severe shift in governing values, because as I said, right now, everyone is sort of complacent with how that cap and non-recurring fund is run. But it's all about choices. I'm going to get to that in a minute. It's all about management by objectives. It's all about having high standards of performance. And it's also a sense of urgency with the public's money. So if you combine all these, governing values as I've described, I would say the Public Works Department should be guided, is the word I'll use, by the mayor. This is his job. Should be guided by the mayor and told that get ready for July 1 because another 1.8 million is coming in, and we want you to have as many things shovel ready as possible. And your goal, management by objectives, is to not have that money sit around, really beyond that fiscal year. Get ready for the money. Get your bids, in shape and ready to put out on the street. Get your plans and designs all organized. And this is new stuff. This is a new culture. This is a new way of doing business. It's a serious and radical shift. Then, again, from the top down, I think it's very tough for the council to do this, and this is beyond the job description of the comptroller. But I think he's, trying to stand in in a way, maybe doing the mayor's job. On this particular issue. We know that sitting in that fund, it was money appropriated in 2009, like 11 years ago. And what's sitting in there now is $40,275. This is an example, but it's a good example. This was money that originated, the original purpose was for Wallace Avenue, that little street that comes into the Whitting Kaplan parking lot. That street was done. I didn't research the date when that was done, but we've been using that street for a long time. We park there, we drive in there, and that street was done, leaving $40,000 left over. It's being held all this time, all these years. It's being held on the grounds that, well, we want to do more work. So now I said in my rant a little while ago, it's all about choices. So we have a choice. We can say, okay, Public Works Department, you can keep that $40,275. You can keep it. Well, we have a choice. Tell you what, why don't you hold on to it for another 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Or the choice could be, time's up. You're not going to lose the money. You're not going to lose the additional work. When you're ready to do it, you come back and tell us, and we'll put it in a cap and non-budget. But the choice we're making now is we're taking that $40,275, we're taking it down and we're putting it into a project that is ready now. There's another example, Chris, and then I'm going to take a break and let you take over a little bit because we got a lot of ground to cover. There is something called the South Turnpike Road Culvert, appropriated in 2011, 9 years ago. And that's 80 grand sitting in there. And what we heard a couple of nights ago was this money was appropriated because there was a grant on the horizon. And I guess the grant became a little squishy. Maybe it went away, maybe it changed, but the grant, hasn't come through since that time. And so the town had a choice. The choice is, how long do we keep that money unused in the cap and non-recurring account? One choice is, let it sit there. That's the choice being made today. Let it sit there another 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We don't know. There's no deadline put on it, but it's been sitting there since 2011. Who knows how long it's going to sit there? But the other choice is, time's up. We're taking that money down. If that grant becomes, and we're putting that money towards paving of streets or repairing sidewalks, and if that grant resurfaces, if it ever does, you come back and we'll find the money and we'll, for the next year's appropriation, you won't lose your project, but we won't lose the use of the money. Chris, I should have brought a glass of water down. I've been talking for a long time. Your turn.
I think you're raising a lot of points. I think it starts with the philosophy of that account. Is that account a savings account, or is it kind of a pass-through account for major projects? And I think the intention is it should be a pass-through account for major projects. I think there are, let me back up. I had sent a email to the comptroller back at the beginning of April, and I listed out 40 of these projects, and I took them from the monthly report. And the 40 projects that I listed out totaled if you added up all the money, the report, this was January's report, the one that I had at that when I wrote the email. When you added up the projects, there was an aggregate amount of $3.7 million that was unspent on projects dating back to the one you mentioned in 2010, the wall at 2010 fiscal year, with another $500,000 encumbered, but not spent yet. Well, it would be spent. So I asked about, the same questions you asked. And I think that in some cases, I thought they gave some good answers. And, there was a project on there that we paid for it with grant money, and the state has to audit it. So there's money, the money sitting in there really isn't our money. And so it has to go back to the state, and the state, they said it takes 10 to 12 years sometimes for the state to come through with these audits. I was like, okay. That was one of them. Let's go to your example of Wallace, the Wallace Ave. So the Wallace Ave one, it's exactly what you described. What they said the reason they didn't finish the work at the time was they ended up paving a different parking lot. I'm going to get there's the east side and the west side of the street. They paved a different one. but you're right. They want to bring it back, and what they want to do is they want to package it as a part of a project with Simpson Court, which they had floated by the council about a year ago. And so for economies of scale, since it's right, they want to do all that paving at once. And, you know, my thought is the two have nothing to do with each other. I mean, it's fine. They're physically close to each other. Sure. You could, you know, bring the paver across the street down the block and do Wallace Ave or do whatever. But I agree. They should have closed that one out, and they should have just, like you said, they should have budgeted. I think I think the sense of urgency isn't there. There's never a sense of urgency to spend money, which sometimes works in the town's favor. And in this case, it does not work in the town's favor. A lot of times it doesn't. But the sense of urgency you're talking about doesn't exist. I think what we can do as a council, and what I was trying to do, is I think we as, if they knew, Public Works and people, they knew that we were looking at this every month, and we were looking at that at budget season, we were going to have real questions. We were going to go through this exercise. And then throughout the year, maybe 3-4 times a year outside of budget season, we would be either calling them before the council, or maybe just sending an email, you know, through the town clerk. So it's documented saying, where are we with these things? If, while our powers as a council really only exist now during budget season when we can actually maneuver money, I think we can set the tone as a council, and at least say we're looking at this, so you're going to have to answer, you know, where this stuff is. But I will say, I thought Rob Waltramitis, who is the new director of Public Works, did really well. He's only been in the job for maybe a year. I don't know how he was in this. Maybe he's been in there a year. But you know, I thought he gave the impression. I did sense a little bit of a sense of urgency from him that I haven't maybe sensed before in the past. So I thought Rob Waltramitis conveyed a kind of a can-do attitude, talking about the roads he wanted to do, expressing he really expressed a desire to clear out some of that old stuff. So we grilled him. I went through line by line with a lot of these projects, and I you know, I made it clear that to everyone that, you know, I felt like the council, you know, not that I felt like the council could pull the plug on any of these. If they're not, now again, there's a political aspect to it. The counter argument is, whoa, you're you know, then you're not going to get, your road's not going to get paved, you know, if you guys take the money. But my response, you know, it didn't get to that point. But I would say, look, if there's a project that's 5, 6, 7 years old, well, your road's not getting paved that way either. So I think it's a matter of the council just firmly saying, we're looking at this now. We don't want to see this dead money, but I felt really good about what he said. I felt like we were going to see some progress here. You may disagree. I don't know.
I became more and more concerned as that progressed, and what I would have liked to have seen was, and I'll never see it in my lifetime, but what I'd like to have seen was something first from the mayor, maybe interrupting the progress of this and saying, Rob is new to the job, and he's full of enthusiasm, and we're going to harness that. And I tasked Rob to get some of this old money out of this account and put that money to work. And I've had a long heart-to-heart with Rob, and he understands that we've got $4 to $5 million in this account that isn't working, and he's going to do everything in his power to make sure all of that or most of that goes out the door in a year. And Rob, you know, could say, yep, that's my goal. And the council could have, but didn't, could have expressed some exasperation about the amount of money stuck in this account. And 1, 2, 3, you know, 4 of them could have backed up that view. Our objective on the council is we cannot run another fund balance, capital non-recurring fund balance of $4, $5, $6 million. It's not fair to the taxpayers. I would have liked to seen Rob have said, Wallace Avenue, take the 40,000. You're right. We're not going to get to it next year. You're right. It's not the most important thing. We could use that money for paving on that culvert. How much is it? 80 grand. Yeah. I'd have liked him to say, take the money. Nothing's going to happen in a year. If something out of the left field pops up, I'll be back to you, and I trust you guys to reinstate the cash. But there's no sense in holding on to that money as we have since 2011. I did not have confidence in the council. I thought, frankly, you were the only one that expressed serious concern about this. I didn't, you point me to it if you want, but I didn't see anyone in back of you expressing the sentiment that we need more urgency. We need, better objectives and better choices. But what was your view?
I think it was, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I think there are other counselors who agree, but I think I happened to go first, and I happened to ask my laundry list of questions. I mean, Jason had the same questions I had. He's like, well, Chris just asked all my questions. So, I mean, Vinny Testa, I thought, had questions. Craig, I think, was asking questions at the end about sort of the overall process with the state funding. So I do think it wasn't just me, but I think this is a 2-year conversation. It's a 3-year conversation. It's not going to happen in one meeting, and there's no value for me to do this, in April of 2020, and then I'm done. In a year from now, I'll open the book up again. Let's do more. If I'm serious about it, I have to be on it more often than this. And I think all it takes is one. Look, all it takes is one of us, one of the 9, to request information, to put an item on the agenda. In terms of let me go back to your point you made about the mayor and Rob. I think the mayor, from what I've learned, his management style, he's in a lot of ways, I feel like he empowers his department heads, for better or for worse. So he's not going to sit there, I don't think, and interrupt Rob. I think he's going to...
I don't want to get bogged down and interrupt or not interrupt. I wanted to hear from the chief executive of the town to say, no, I do have a sense of urgency, and this is an unacceptable...
He doesn't agree with that. He doesn't think obviously it's not unacceptable, because it's the way we do stuff. Why would he say that?
That's right.
But in the absence of the chief executive of the town agreeing with you, I do think Rob is going to make a dent in that, and I think it's going to get better.
Jim Bowes said at the council meeting that he went through the accounts and that he found old projects that had money attached to them, but the money didn't need to be attached any longer, and that he took these accounts down, freeing up cash to be used for whatever is decided. It has to be done with a council approval, but probably the mayor of the Public Works would make a recommendation. During that conversation, he said he found $1.2 million. And I think I saw it through the TV screen. And I wish I had a Kleenex for you. You began salivating over that money to apply to the pool. I saw that.
Yes.
So that's the right way to think. Choices. We have 1.2 million, he said. So what are the choices in front of us? Is there a good faith discussion about it? I tried to find what Jim was talking about, and I took those monthly reports, because I always do this. I try to reverse engineer the numbers. I've learned over the years that sometimes mistakes are made. I couldn't find what he was talking about after reviewing these monthly reports and a lot of other documents. It's about $272,000 that I found. And I think that's all he took down, but I'm sure that's going to be clarified. But let me go through some other quick examples to give our viewers just a flavor of what we're up against here. The parking lot money, the Quinnipiac Hall Avenue parking lot, I guess it's near the old train station. You realize that was appropriated in 2013? That was 7 years ago. I don't know if that's going to be done this year. That question wasn't asked. But, around 2015 or 16, there should have been a question, not by the council necessarily, but by the mayor. Is this really going to get done? And if the answer is no, well, then you take it down, you apply it to things that will get done, and you bring the money back when it's shovel ready, when you're really ready to do it. Townwide paving in 2016 has $48,000 left in it. In 2014, a lot of money was appropriated for townwide paving. There's $500,000 of that unused. sitting there since 2014, and we heard a couple of nights ago that Rob Ultramitis could pave a lot more roads. He could do well. They're not using this money for that. I mean, that's why I say I got a little more concerned. There's no excuse to have $500,000 sitting around for town-wide paving since 2014 that's not going to be used. I see her salivating again to get at me, so go ahead.
You're right. And so when I asked about that,
Yeah.
I said, we could use that for the pool too. And I think Rob was sitting in the same room as the mayor. They're on the phone. I heard this. I heard no in the back. I swear I heard it. No, the mayor. I think, and then Rob said, I can pave more roads with that, and we're going to try to use that. So I'm confident that's going to get.
Why not this year? Why didn't he say, and we're using it this year? See, that's my problem.
Well, we'll find out. This goes back to my point earlier. This is a 2-year. This is an ongoing conversation.
Okay.
As a counselor, you've got to keep going back to it. In September, what did you pay? Okay, now the summer's over. It's still warm enough out to keep paving. Where are you with this? And then in November, when you're kind of through the season, where are you with this? So that when you get to next budget, you haven't waited. You have a paper trail, and you've kept on top of it, and it gets harder. And so when you get to the budget next year, and the council says, you know what, we are going to take that 40. We're reclassifying it, and it gets harder to argue against it. I think we'll see.
So I mentioned that Jimbo said he took down some projects. He thought it was 1.2 million that freed up money. I think it's only 272,000. But what was closed out was very interesting. Mm-hmm. In 2014, a lot of money was appropriated for athletic fields. And since that time, $229,000, a little more than that, has been sitting around athletic fields. Now, there's a reason why that much money was appropriated to begin with. I don't know what that reason was. And then the following year, another 40,000 was appropriated. Well, that money is now being nulled out. That money is now being taken down. If the athletic fields needed upgrades, they're not going to get it. There was no questions raised about, hey, don't we need to do anything with athletic fields? I mean, what was the reason? Did that reason go away? Are they in better condition than we thought? I mean, I don't know, but I hear anecdotally that there are issues with some of the athletic fields. Some of them are on school properties, some of them are not. It's just interesting that athletic fields took a hit. I don't know, but that seemed to be the bulk of what was taken down. Your thoughts?
They did what you wanted. They said, we're not going to do that. And you're criticizing them. Now you're like, if you want athletic fields, you budget it in the next year's budget. And they're like, all right, so they did what you wanted. So I don't know. The best question
you can ask is why, you know?
Sometimes it's the best question.
That's the best question you can ask. You know, why is this happening? Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Citizen Mike Show. You can catch us up on YouTube. Search on the YouTube search bar, Citizen Mike Wallingford channel. I can also send you an email with the YouTube link in it. Just let me know you want an email. I post up notices of the show on Facebook. Go to my page. And also WPAA is back broadcasting our shows, and we're grateful for that at 9 o'clock weekdays. So go to WPAA, check out what they've got and their other shows and productions too. Thanks everybody. See you later, Chris. Bye-bye.